And of course, you need to be specific about the rights and their limitations, so they are like signs pointing in certain directions. And then when you go in that direction, you have to be more specific. But of course, again, there are some problems here, because how much this political support is worth remains to be seen when it comes down to decisions, especially decisions where national interests are at stake. And I don't have to mention specific names of specific countries, but you can always, I'm sure, from your own experience, imagine what I'm thinking of. Many politicians argue, if a European proposal benefits my country, I'm for it, otherwise not. Or if a global proposal benefits Europe, I'm for it, otherwise not. So you can talk about human rights, but then when it comes to action, you sometimes act differently, contrary to the provisions. And why is that? My explanation is simple and somewhat cynical. Politicians want to be re-elected, and in a democracy, people's votes count. So if national interests go against European interests, some politicians will feel the wind of the opinion and vote for the national interest and against the Europeans. If some European proposals, global proposals, benefit Europe, they will be for it, but if they will not benefit Europe, if they mean that we will have to reduce our standard of living or sacrifice something, then it's a difficult message to sell, and some politicians will not be in favor of that. I mean, that's the world we live in. We have to be realistic about that. Now, finally, a few words about the possibility of distinctive European approaches. The name of the group is European Group of Ethics, as you know, and we don't need that. I want to call your attention to a particular and I think important aspect of the European Union, and that is the European Union as a peace project. European museums are full of paintings reminding us of the bloody history of Europe. Germany versus France, Sweden versus Germany, Spain versus the Netherlands, England versus France, and you can have a long list. And I made 2 trips in my life which made a profound impression on me. One was to the battlefields of Flanders, where you could walk in the, where the battles were fought, and you could see everything. The other one was to concentration camps in Poland. And that is why I attach a great deal of importance to this EU as a peace project. And I would like to also remind you of the general political aim expressed by the first Council President in November 2009. Europe is a community of values. And when Barroso was re-elected, he said in similar terms, I will redouble my efforts to make an ambitious Europe happen. A Europe that puts people at the heart of the policy agenda and projects European values and interest in the world. There's a more imperialistic tone to the last quote than to the previous, but focus in both cases is on European values. And that requires us to think about the concept of value. And we are entering into very difficult territory now, but values can be interpreted, classified and understood in many ways. So that, first of all, there's not just one concept of value, there are different concepts of value. And starting points for attempts to understand and explicate the notion of value relevant in this context are either, I would suggest, conceptions of what's good for people in the long run, given what we know about human nature or human needs and things like that, or to proceed. This is a more Aristotelian approach. Proceed on the basis of conceptions of what constitutes and contributes to a good life. Now, the problem with these is that, both of them, is that if these conceptions are empirical, based on actual studies of preferences of individuals and groups, they have limited validity. I mean, they are valid as far as these studies indicate, but people are different. And Future studies may show different things. If they are based on metaphysical and religious assumptions, they will be as convincing as these metaphysical and religious assumptions are. And we all know that desirable does not follow from desired. So there are problems in the concept of value. But health is a good example. I mean, health is something that we all cherish, a value for all of us. But there are many others: human dignity, integrity, various freedoms, including autonomy, safety and security, justice, prosperity, equity and equality, as well as solidarity. And then we have some other sets of values, including economic growth, quality of life, beauty, knowledge, and democratic values like openness, transparency, participation in decision-making, political values, in other words. And of course, you can have a long list specifying what we consider to be good, what contributes to a good life. And the important point is not to try to give us a long list that is complete, because we will never achieve that. The important point is to look at the value structures that you can identify. And here I have two lists. And in the left one, you see freedom of research at top, then economic growth, health, and so on. And at bottom, safety and integrity. And the important point is that it's exactly the same values in the other list, but the order is reversed. So there you have freedom of research and economic growth at bottom, and at top you have integrity, safety and security, individual self-determination. And of course you can use these lists of value structures to distinguish between different cultures, different societies, different ways of living, because in different societies you put a different price on different values. And that is, I think, something that you need to reflect about. And cultures in Europe, there are different cultures in Europe, of course. Historical, political, religious traditions, north, south, east, west, we all know that. If we widen our perspective and look at the world, this is a world map of values. And if you have good eyes and sit in the front row, you can see Sweden in the top right corner. And you can see Poland and Zimbabwe in other places of this map. Catholic Europe in the middle, English-speaking countries below Sweden. There are two dimensions here, self-expression values and rational values. And Sweden is on top of both. And then you can see Zimbabwe at bottom of both. Interesting. But it also drives home the point that in different parts of the world, these ranking orders of values are different. Contains a lot of food for thought. And now coming back to the distinctive European approach, question mark. There are two problems here. Do European values differ radically from values outside Europe? And are European values generally accepted within Europe? So you can see two figures in red, 2 and 3, and the others are in black. And if you want to be able to say there are distinctive European values, there are possibly a distinctive European approach, then you have to look at the columns in red, so that there are values within Europe which are not accepted outside Europe, or there are values accepted in Europe which are not accepted outside. So let us take one problem at a time. There are many differences within Europe. That's the first problem. If you think about the moral status of the embryo and the moral status of the fetus, if you think about euthanasia, terminal sedation, if you think about different views on the patient's right to know, and if you think about the rights of the individual versus the rights of the collective, the position and role of women in society and the individual contra the family, animal health and welfare. I talked to the chairman of the Nuffield Council about the report they wrote on animals in research. He said it was the most difficult report that he had chaired for a long time. It was a very thick report. And this is a big issue in the UK, as you know. In other countries in Southern Europe and elsewhere, this is looked upon differently. So there is a problem with the European values. Which are the European values, and are they all accepted within Europe? And then what about other values? I mean, Europeans don't have monopoly on autonomy or justice or some of the other things that we think are good things, because they are also prominent elsewhere. So individual autonomy ranks high in UK and US cultures, we all know that. And though some UK cities are very multicultural, like Manchester, but they don't rank high in all Asian and African cultures, and of course autonomy may be interpreted differently. The individual, the group, the family could make the decision. So when you talk about autonomy, it's really not one value, it's several values, and you need to make distinctions, which complicates the comparison. But the point I want to make is that we can discuss identity of cultures as perceived by outsiders and as perceived by those belonging to the culture. And the identity of the culture can be characterized in terms of ranking orders of values. So here again, you have a simplified version of the figure I showed earlier: integrity, safety, prosperity, and freedoms. And integrity at top here, and freedom at top in the other. Now, what holds a union? Now I've been critical now against the idea and pointed out the difficulties of identifying European values that are specific to Europe, not accepted elsewhere. On the other hand, there's something to be said for the importance of this concept. And if you ask yourself what holds a union or a nation together, not just geography, not just a particular leader, not just the possession of powerful weapons, not even a common history, I think norms and values will play a crucial role in the integration of the members of the European Union. And if you look at the history of the Roman Empire, you can get further food for thought. So common values and common goals are important. There are many things we can learn from history, many things we can't learn from history, but we can learn about the importance of common values, common goals, and common enemies. And you can see when you read about the part, people don't want to risk their lives for something they don't believe in. And this has been demonstrated again and again. This is one of my favorite pictures. I took it hanging outside a hotel window in Milan. And I let the three cars represent different values: human dignity, social solidarity, and various freedoms and autonomies. And the question, is there one specific European ranking order of values, independent of issues and context? The answer is no. But if you specify the issue, if you specify the context, there are some interesting candidates. And there is a family of widely accepted ranking orders in Europe in which certain values rank high, though not equally high, depending on what you are talking about, which differ from ranking orders outside Europe. And high-ranking values in Europe include social solidarity and political justice. So you can think about family resemblances between families, within a family, and these families, of course, differ. I have alluded to some of my writings on this in these papers, and you can get access to them easily. I will be happy to comment on any questions that you may have. I agreed with those who organized this meeting that I should talk for 45 minutes, and as you can see, I did that so that we would have time for some discussion afterwards.
We do have, according to my watch, 10 minutes, and according to the clock there, 15 minutes. So we may go to 12 and a half, so we're not late. Questions from your end? Does anybody have an additional question?
Yeah, I was interested about what you say about human dignity, because obviously, you're saying all these different sort of concepts, and human dignity is quite sort of important within my work. I'm just sort of interested in how, within this group of people who aren't representing their country, how do you guys come to a sort of notion of human dignity that's sort of intrinsic within your work? Is there any sort of commonality when you try and apply it, or is it something they don't even use?